it's a crazy place today where we are. You know,
It is.
So maybe we got a little reprieve that we've got to do the podcast now, right?
I guess so. Oh, everybody walked away.
They all walked away. It's not crazy anymore, right? They're just walking by.
Exactly.
It's that kind of way. Well, welcome to the 12-2 podcast, Bud and Kevin, or more appropriately, Kevin and Bud, back with you. And dude,
been a crazy couple weeks.
It really is.
I guess week.
Yeah,
really.
crazy week, few days.
Yeah. I mean,
It's
after the
insane.
assassination, they did the Republican convention, where
Yeah.
I guess it's all Hulk Hogan. If you
Yeah,
watched
the Hulkster was
Yeah.
amazing. Oh man, it was amazing.
It kind of threw me back to being a kid a little bit.
Yeah, it was really
anyway,
cool.
that
And I thought it
was-
was funny too, where Tucker Carlson came on, and the Fox folks did not exactly know how to handle that. That was
that's
kind of
true.
wild. You got a great T-shirt on today.
Oh.
The Word of God, if you can't read it, is the anvil on which the opinions of men are smashed. Spurgeon.
the Prince of Preachers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was pretty
Yeah.
good.
Again,
Yeah.
the T-shirt comes from Reformed Sage, so we'll throw a link down there. Got some excellent. Got some new ones coming out. I'm gonna pick some up this weekend.
Are you really?
I'm gonna order some. Yeah.
Man, do you ever
Yeah.
wear the same shirt twice?
Oh yeah, I do.
Oh, you do?
Oh,
Okay, I don't know if you were. You got so
No.
many, you just continually cycle.
I don't
say,
have enough.
Can I have your, your hand-me-downs, right?
Well, we'll see.
Well, maybe. I don't know.
But anyway, yeah.
Let's go for it. What do you think?
Okay.
Last week we kind of got to the place where we with the assassination attempt and all, we talked about democracy and all that. We heard that this language of vitriol, right, which has kind of led to the violence, et cetera, and we
Right.
kind of heard a lot about that. We talked about the fact that what is a real threat to democracy? We don't really know. I don't think our nation, Kevin, knows what a threat to democracy is, because our nation really does not understand what democracy is.
I was going to say they don't even know what democracy.
They
really
don't know what it is.
You're right.
And the goal of the progressive movement is to redefine the mainstream, right? It's to
of course.
redefine the baseline, the standard, and we talked about that, to something that is totally opposite to what biblical values really bring us to. Agree with that?
Oh yeah, most definitely.
And so when we hear these words, we have to recognize the shift in the meaning that they have gone through with the help of the media, 90+% of which self-proclaim to be liberals, progressives themselves.
Exactly.
And so the whole thing, and we don't have time to talk about this today, but morality no longer drives us. Ideology drives us.
Yeah, that's a good way. That's a good way to say it. There's and it's not even just, it's whatever your ideology happens to be. Your personal ideology drives. It's not an agreed upon ideology, or what we used to have was an agreed upon morality based in Judeo-Christian principles, which came directly out of Scripture.
And now ideology seems to come from whatever the boilerplate cookie cutter kind of thing that society calls it or creates it to be, right?
Yeah.
Liberalism, because it's like, when certain people that are on, that would be left of center, for example, say, well, I'm a liberal. Well, my question is, well, tell me, what about abortion? What about this? And so it's almost like everything that falls into that liberal ideology, for the most part, and this is a real controversial statement, I'm probably getting in trouble for it, is whatever the opposite of the biblical position would appear to be.
It seems that way. I mean,
and that's an extreme. I know.
Yeah, I don't know if it is. I don't know if it
is.
is an extreme. It's very interesting, and I wouldn't necessarily say liberal. I think we need to go ahead and shift our words to progressive.
Yeah, probably.
Because when you think of old school liberals, through our time, they loved America, and they would say, God bless America. I mean,
and a lot of them would be horrified at abortion.
Right. And are horrified at where our country is right now.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
Yesterday, we know that Netanyahu spoke at a joint session of Congress. And this is I don't remember this ever happening where our closest ally in the Middle East, somebody that we have an agreement, Judeo-Christian principles. You're talking about, we have a common bond throughout centuries with the Jewish people,
Mhm,
and the
mhm.
church came out of the Jewish culture.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
Christ
Yeah.
was born a Jew.
Right, exactly, yeah.
You know, so there's an affinity there, a natural affinity. But for the first time, he spoke, and a president wasn't there,
Right.
nor was the vice president, the
Right.
Democratic nominee. Neither one of them were there, and several members of Congress didn't show
I
up.
think it was like 50 or so that didn't
Something
show
like
up.
that, and they were
Unbelievable.
all of the progressive side.
Yes.
And then,
yes.
I mean, even what is it? Schumer, the
Mhm.
majority leader of the Senate, who is Jewish,
Mhm,
would not even shake Netanyahu's hand or speak with him.
mhm,
And so you
mhm.
had this going on, and then outside in
Oh,
Washington D.C.,
Crazy, wasn't it?
they were in front of the, I guess it was the Union Station,
Mm-hmm.
tearing down the American flag, burning it
Mhm.
while putting up a Palestinian flag.
Mhm.
And it just, and I think Netanyahu summed it up pretty well. He says, especially when he was talking about, the protesters, the Gazan protesters, he said,
Mhm.
he was like, they hang homosexuals from cranes
Right,
in,
yeah.
in Iran,
Yeah.
and yet you are supporting what they stand for.
Mhm.
You are nothing more than basically fools, useful idiots.
Yeah.
For the Iranians. And then he also drew a hard line. He said that if you're supporting Hamas, you are supporting people who will come in and will kill people, innocent people who are
Mhm.
just living their lives.
Mhm.
And he shared a story where, there was a family that was in their house when Hamas came in. They hid their children in a secret place, a secret attic
Mhm.
place, and Hamas kills both parents. And then they were able to find where both the children were babies, and they killed both of them. And he said, if you are supporting Hamas, that is what you are supporting.
Yeah.
The actual killing of babies, which,
Mhm.
if you think about it on the progressive side, that's not a very far step,
Right.
because they're all for sacrificing babies on the altar of convenience
Yeah,
for
exact-
sexual freedom. So what's one more step that,
Right. Right.
that somebody that we hate. And it was just interesting because also Tucker Carlson was talking about this with a couple of interviews that he did over the past couple of days, where they were talking about, it's very interesting when the progressives come to power in the form typically of communism,
Mhm.
Marxism comes to power, which is what progressives are. One of the first people they go after are the Christians,
Mhm.
because they
We're in-
have
we're in
a
the way.
morality
Yeah.
that is outside of government,
Right.
that doesn't,
Transcends government.
right, that says, hey, this is right and this is wrong.
Mhm.
And those systems are designed for one thing, and that is killing a bunch of people.
Yep.
And they typically start with Christians, and you can just go down China, Russia,
Mhm.
Venezuela,
Mhm.
Cuba. I mean,
Yeah.
just over and over and over again.
The track record is there.
Right.
And so it kind of goes back to the whole thing, as I mentioned earlier, that it's almost like what we're seeing in progressivism is anything that goes against biblical traditional values.
Because
right?
it's satanic in origin.
It is satanic, and because of that, we get into situations where people who are rooting for Hamas, right, because they're obviously they're not pro Jehovah God
Right.
at all,
Oh,
right?
no.
But yet they are, as you said, hanging homosexuals from cranes. And that is another people group. And the idea is, well, that's okay. Nothing wrong with being homosexual if you're a progressive.
If you're
right?
a progressive, right? You
And
say
so-
I should be able to express myself sexually any way I so choose.
Yeah. So who do you stand up for, right?
Right.
If you're a progressive, because you've got two groups of people that you are aligned with who are doing this to each other, and we continually see the same thing: silence.
Oh yeah.
We see the cause of women, for example, in the
Ooh.
United States, be totally compromised because those who claim to stand up for women, well, that changes when that woman is a conservative, right?
Right.
Or they have traditional biblical values. The same things racially with an African American. An African
Well, look
American
at Clarence Thomas.
Look at Tim
they
Scott.
have-
Look at some of the current politicians, some folks
Correct.
who almost figured in this current election, right? And they do figure,
Yeah.
but maybe not as prominently as perhaps they would have. But I think it's so important that that our listeners, understand. They got to understand what's going on behind all this.
Well, I find when you spoke of women, and it just triggered a thing, in Iran,
Mhm.
which supports Hamas,
Right.
which they would do the same thing, and they do the same thing.
Mhm.
They kill women if they're not properly dressed, or they will beat them.
Yeah.
Yet, supposedly, progressives champion the cause of feminism,
Mhm.
and they've championed it so much that they can't even define what a woman is.
Yeah.
But yet, they'll support a group over here that would beat women and kill them if they're not wearing the proper headgear. But over here, they will, lambast somebody. They will lambast a woman because she has conservative values and doesn't support abortion or something to that effect.
It just, all this totally is so clear to us that the only standard of morality that holds water, that aligns, perfectly, I believe, is that of what Scripture gives us.
Most definitely.
Nothing that is man-made from a morality perspective it can align, can be congruent. There's contradictions that push back against each other.
Oh, of course, because and then who gets to establish the morality if it's coming from man himself? It's the person who is the mightiest.
Yeah.
Might makes right.
Yeah, because that's the only thing that can prevail, right?
Right.
When this is going on.
Which brings me to, which makes me think, that we've heard a lot, and we saw this past week with the Republican convention, they've begun to tone down their pro-life stance and their pro-marriage stance and that type of thing.
Mhm.
And part of that has to do with there is a section of conservatism that is, without a moral basis.
Right.
It's conservatism without Christ.
Mhm.
And when you get that,
it's almost like a libertarianism, which is really based upon more of an economic conservatism as opposed to a social conservatism.
Yeah, more concerned about low gas prices and having a great economy. Which I don't get me wrong, I appreciate it.
But they dodge the issue of abortion,
right? But they have no morality underneath that. So conservatism without Christ is you have to have Christ there.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you have no basis for why you believe. Somebody had a little interesting meme. It was just like conservatism without Christ is we're still going the same direction as progressives. We just do it at a slower speed.
That's true. And if you think about, just what we have seen over the years, and we make the fact now that JFK was probably as conservative as a lot of the folks labeled as Republican today.
At least Lindsey Graham.
Maybe most.
He even had to have been conservative, at least as conservative as him.
So and that's just the reality of what we're seeing. So it's crazy time. Man, we haven't even got to any more on the assassination attempt or the stepping out of the campaign of our president.
Oh yeah, you had the convention, and that was. The Republicans came out of it pretty unified.
They did a good job.
Yeah,
they did a great job.
Ted Cruz says it was the best one he's ever been to. There was a lot of that. And then almost immediately you end up with the whole thing with Biden. We can't win.
Yeah.
And then we know at some point there was behind the scenes, and some people are calling it a coup, but there was people who were pushing him to get out of the race.
And if you can't look at that and see that as what it is,
right,
a true circumvention of democracy.
Right.
How many the primary voters their
will or whatever their case is done.
It's gone.
Right.
And now somewhere in a back room somewhere, this stuff has apparently already been decided, because apparently Harris has gotten enough committed delegates now to get the nomination.
Yeah, and I think more important to that is she got the money.
Yeah,
money trumps delegates anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that Alex Soros, who is George Soros' son, who is a big time progressive, and he pushes a lot of money. He's the one he threw his weight behind her, and that kind of got her going. And here's somebody who was unable to get one delegate the first time she ran.
Right, exactly. Did not even make it.
Right. She fell out before the Iowa caucus.
Yeah.
And then gets picked as the VP, who Biden said the reason why he picked who he's going to pick was he wanted, a woman of color.
Mm-hmm.
So she, and some people have said she's a DEI hire, and we can acknowledge that. We don't need to, focus on that. That's not going to win the election.
Mm-hmm.
But, she obviously, she never has garnered very much support from the general Democratic average person.
Yeah.
And now she's the nominee.
And
or presumptive nominee.
Even in the Senate in 4 years, only 2 pieces of legislation she ever introduced, and neither one of them passed. And so it just kind of goes to show you, once again, the problem we're facing with, and I said this to a team that I was with in Chicago this week, in Chicago of all places, that politics is not a meritocracy. It's far from it, right? The business world is much more of a meritocracy than the idea of politics being that way, and we're seeing
right.
that.
I mean, unfortunately, politics has fallen down to it's basically a popularity contest, or who can get me the most stuff that I want, which is something that our founders, when they established the country, were very much concerned about. I mean,
yes, they were.
Ben Franklin comes out, the famous quote, the lady said, "What have you done?" And he said, "We have given you a republic if you can keep it."
If you can keep it.
Right. And they were very concerned that once the people figured out they could vote themselves,
right,
money
from the treasury,
that they would never go back.
They would do exactly that.
Yeah, and that's basically what's happened. It's and
here's the thing, though, the way that to go from the founders, and as you said, they did a great job of putting in checks and balances in our system, right?
Right.
But what has happened is this progressive shifting of the meaning of words and terms.
Oh yeah.
Is given space for those checks and balances to be significantly compromised, so that the very things that our founders were trying to go against are now being seen as legitimate.
Oh yeah.
Because of the new definitions of words and terms and meanings of phrases.
I mean, just think of Biden's speech last night, where he said, he kind of tipped the hand of what her objective's going to be next, or if she gets in for the next 4 years. And that was, we've got to do something about this Supreme Court because we no longer control it.
Yeah.
We need to do something about it. So, and that was a check against the executive branch and the legislative branch that our founders put in. But, they want to do away with all tradition and, do things like pack the court and that type of stuff. The scary part about it is, if Harris, she was labeled the most liberal senator.
Yeah.
And that,
and that was left of Bernie Sanders,
right?
Who is,
but you can't find that page anymore.
No, they took it down.
Also, she was the border czar,
right? But now she's not.
But now she's not, never was,
right?
Even though she was,
a high-ranking Democratic official, David Axelrod, right? One of Obama's key men said, "Oh no, she was never the border czar. She was, just working on some systemic issues around the border, right? And obviously, she did such a great job, right?
She did a tremendous job. That we have 15
whatever
15
the number
million,
is,
and that's a scary proposition too. That you just have 15 that you don't know where they are, who they are. And you've just allowed them into the country. And we know that a lot of them, of course, not all of them, but we know that there's a lot, a significant number come out of the prisons and the mental institutions and, are wreaking havoc on
Americans and other Hispanics and other folks of other ethnicities.
Right.
As well.
I mean, and it's just not Hispanics. I mean, we've had Haitians come through, a large number of Chinese come through. I mean, a large number of
Iranians.
I mean, we've seen, and we're not keeping track of them. I know that there was a tragic, just a Senate hearing where a lady who was part of Homeland Security or something to that effect said that they had lost 35,000 children that had come across the border. I mean, they didn't have no idea where they are. And when she started to speak up about it, she got fired from her government job because they were basically like, we don't know where they are and it's not our problem anymore.
Yeah.
And so, and they, which is a tragedy. Again, that whole thing is a tragedy, but
What a
You know,
place to
and then
be.
the worst thing with probably Kamala Harris is the fact that she's so pro abortion. I mean,
Yeah.
she's
Yeah.
like to the extreme.
A
Yeah.
cheerleader for it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Uh-huh.
you know, and she's the first sitting president and vice president to ever go to a Planned Parenthood.
Convention.
Well,
or
I think it was
something, or
what a clinic
a clinic.
while she was serving in office.
Mm.
But yeah, she is a champion of it.
Can't get to the border though.
No,
Right.
but we can go to where they kill babies.
Right.
Anyway.
This is so evil. Let's
It
just
is.
call it for what it is. It's so
It
evil.
is, but Satan
Mhm.
has always been trying to destroy what is good.
Mhm. Mhm.
And we have to be honest that Western civilization, as influenced by the church throughout the Middle Ages, and
Mhm.
is
Mhm.
what brought about a lot. I mean, it brought about outlawing of slavery. Let's be
Mhm.
honest. That was
Mhm.
William Wilberforce, and the reason why
Yeah.
he did it was because he was a devoted follower of Christ and
Right.
said, we shouldn't be doing this.
This goes totally
and that
against.
outlawed slavery across the world. And the British Empire basically said, if you have a slave ship, we're sinking it.
Mhm.
So you had that. Treating women's rights, if for lack of a better word, was out of Christian nations.
Mhm.
Child labor laws comes out of Christian
Right.
nations.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
honest day's wage for an honest day's work comes out of Christianity. And we see
Mhm.
Western civilization reach the height of human development. And somebody that I was listening to said, that is one of the things that, if you think about what God wants for the earth, it is for humans to do good things
Yeah.
and develop to the fullest extent that they can.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Satan hates that, and he will
Yeah.
do everything he can to destroy it. And this is
Mhm.
just another way, I think.
Well, it goes back to the power, right?
Yeah.
The power that kind of trumps everything that all we've seen in human development, right? And the greed and the power that people have, and which is obviously a satanic thing. But also, there is great sin in the heart of man, even without the help of Satan.
That
right?
is true. Yes.
And so two forces that are kind of coming against the true progress that we've made. When I say progress now, I'm talking about progress toward biblical and Christian principles and precepts, etc. That's what we're seeing, and we're seeing it now in our country. Two incredibly significant things. You mentioned the Supreme Court, that we are at the place where folks are willing to, the politicians are actually willing to say that.
Yeah.
They're not even worried about keeping it under wraps now, because they truly think that they have converted the mainstream. They have converted the mainstream to be that which they want to promote, which is that absence of God and that absence of biblical principles in our society. And so it's okay to say that now, because that actually tends to foster this new thought process or this new ideology that they're trying to put out there. And then, like you said, we talked about already, just the circumvention of the primaries in our political process. It's taking my ball and going home. I can't win.
Right.
You've got a point that you're making, and you know what? I have a counterpoint to you, but everybody's agreeing with you right now. So I'm just not even going to bother saying what I want to say, because you're going to win, right? And so I'm just going to go home. And so now what they do is they change candidates for whatever reason. I can't understand. It seemed like such a knee-jerk reaction to move directly to her. And I just think they're going to disenfranchise a lot of people.
Well, they
in
may.
the process.
Yeah. I mean,
But they may energize some more. Who knows?
I mean, there was and they say that, the base or their base is now energized, and look at all the money we raised. But, of course, to that is a lot of that money was being held off.
Right. It was there. Yeah.
Yeah. It was there. It just
Mhm.
wasn't, people were
It wasn't
holding
flowing.
it back.
Yeah, it
And
wasn't
as soon as he was off the ticket, that it flooded. But, it's one of those things, they've hidden this. They've known this.
Yeah.
The powers that be have known that he was in mental decline.
But they had everybody in their sphere, with the talking points. Oh, no, he's fine. He's great. There's no problem.
Until he
Right.
wasn't.
Until he wasn't.
And
Right.
then all of a sudden,
There
You
he
know,
was.
So here's the scary thing. If they, the media, the power, the people in power,
Mhm.
the Democratic Party, Kamala, if they're willing to lie to the American people for 3
Mhm.
years, 3.5 years about the condition of Joe Biden,
Mhm.
what makes you think that they won't continue to lie to us about other things?
Yeah, but there's still, or half America's still going to vote for them, and that's
I
the sad.
understand
That's
that.
the sad part about it.
Yeah.
And I was funny. I was listening to an interview where, yeah, just one of our conservative pundits just simply said, "I just don't have that much faith in the American people in terms of their willingness to become informed and intelligent
And
about the reality."
and that's a sad commentary.
Mhm.
And it shows, well, I think it shows a couple of things. First of all, it shows the weakness of our churches
Mhm.
because they
Yeah.
haven't been educating Christian people from the pulpit
Right.
about what it means to be a
Mhm.
follower of Christ. That
Mhm.
number one. Number two,
Mhm.
our school system, of course, has been completely co-opted by the
Yeah.
progressive side. So they are no longer instilling into the average American kid a sense of pride or
Right.
civic duty to the country in which you were born and
Right.
have the opportunity to participate in. Those two things are the main things that I think we end up here. And then it's also our personal desire. We like comfort. And let's be honest,
Mhm.
most Christians enjoy their pet sins,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
don't want to live a dedicated life
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
Christ. And
Yeah.
so, I mean,
That is so true. And one day we got to talk about that because I'm amazed at so many things. And you and I both, we grew up in what we would call, certain points of our lives, legalistic
right.
cultures or contexts, et cetera. And even some of that has merit in terms of certain sins to stay away from. And I'm amazed today to see how tolerant that Christians are in
Oh, yeah.
evangelical churches with
What you would consider good churches.
yeah, evangelical,
Strong pastors, biblical pastors, how
yeah,
they're
how permissive we have become in certain things, and it just blows me away. I mean, I realize I'm probably an old codger at this point, old curmudgeon, right? Kind of about this stuff, but it
the old guy
blows
yelling,
me
"Get
away.
off my grass."
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. You gotta get there. That
but I
place.
do think some of that has to do with we've just failed to teach. Again, we
Yeah.
go back to the 12:2 podcast. What we're basing this off of
Yeah.
is Romans 12:2.
Yeah.
You transformation, not being conformed to the world,
Mhm.
being transformed to be more like Christ comes through knowing what God's word is, the
Yeah.
renewing of the mind.
Yeah.
Because
yeah.
what you look at, what you put into your mind, what you
Mhm.
are constantly thinking about, what you're reading, what you are listening to, those things impact you and they will determine
Yeah.
what kind of a person you're going to be. I
Yeah.
mean, what is the saying goes? The only difference that will happen in your life is the books you read and the people you meet or something to that effect. That's the only way that's how you'll be different next year or whatever the
Yeah.
case is.
Maybe.
Because,
Maybe. Yeah.
But again, goes back to the fact that transformation comes from learning.
Mhm.
And if you're going to be transformed to be more like Christ,
Yeah.
that transformation or that learning comes from the Bible.
Right.
You got to know what it says.
Yeah, yeah, and truth resides in the mind. That's the place, right? That's
Right.
where we store it. That's where we apply it. That's where we, that's where we figure out what principles are operative in given situations.
Right. The heart will follow the mind.
Yeah,
And it's not good when the
mind follows the heart.
Yeah.
But that happens a lot.
yeah,
right?
that's when you get in trouble.
Yeah,
a lot of times.
and that's so true. And it's the leading and lagging indicator kind of thing. Like
Yeah.
what comes first in your life, right?
Right.
If you're going to go first with your heart, you're probably going to have some thoughts that are going to be negative toward women, right? Sexual thoughts, or
Right.
lustful thoughts, etc.
Right.
You're going to view women in a very disrespectful way, and that is going to carry out in the way that you treat them wherever, in the workplace, at church, wherever.
Right. I mean,
Um,
can anyone say Harvey Weinstein?
Sure, yeah, and a lot of people who are maybe not quite to that dramatic
Right.
level, right? But we see it every day, and
Yes,
it's
we do.
happening all the time.
Yeah.
On a smaller scale in our nation, right?
Yep.
So anyway, it's been good.
Yeah, we got to
Been
get
good
out of
today.
here.
We do.
Yeah.
We
So
got so
again-
much to talk about.
Yeah, well, it just keeps coming. I mean,
It does. Yeah, they
we
keep-
are
totally
living in the
does.
middle of history, and this is so.
Yeah.
It makes it fun. It makes it interesting, and
Didn't even have
Again-
time to analyze the sloped roof or anything, right?
No
today.
slope roof. So, anyway, like us, follow us, and tell your friends.
Yep. See you next time. God bless.